An ex-model, a dancer, a gay wedding planner, a celebrity columnist, a university lecturer, and an almost qualified barrister all walk into a room. Nope, it's not the opening of the Northern Ireland Assembly. These titles and a few other names, I'm sure, are how people have come to know me. So I guess I should go right back to the start. 26th of August 1978, it was a Saturday in the Mazarine Hospital in Antrim, and a band parade and a fine representation of the Royal Black Institution marched past as a 6 £9 ounces jaundiced baby came screaming and kicking into the world. "Ah, the bands are out to celebrate his birth," the nurse said to my mother. My mother, of course, giggled at the irony of the suggestion as Northern Ireland's finest Protestant order and accompanying bands marching by, as her son, a Catholic, was born. This was the first of the many contradictions that would form me, the person that stands before you today. When I think back to my earliest memories at around 5 or 6 years of age, I discovered that I could make money and build my network by getting to know the neighbours. Back in the 80s, shops would give you 5p or 10p per empty bottle returned, and I was only too happy to be the broker. I would knock on their doors filled with confidence and a steely determination to get to know them and, more importantly, get their empty bottles. But that enterprise came to an end in the mid-80s. My parents split up and we moved from our nice detached house to a terraced house on a council estate. It was a new world for me as a young child, filled with curiosity. The houses were all joined together. The kids spoke differently and there was a constant flow of people in and out of their homes. Everything seemed louder. It was confronting and challenging in a way that was alien to my former leafy suburban life. I remember feeling very exposed. I knew it didn't fit in. I wasn't better than this world, just alien to it. But I also knew I had to adapt. So I became the best little hellraiser that any of my peers had ever met, and it was around this time that I began to realise I was not fond of school. School reports would all say the same thing. Anthony has a lot of potential, but he will not apply himself. I recall the big date of the 11+ exam. Teachers constantly warning, if you don't pass that, there'll be no grammar school for you, which means no university, which means you may as well consider the rest of your life a failure. Or at least that's how I understood the messages being delivered. But rather than encouraging me to knuckle down, this was fuel for the fire in my rebellion, and unsurprisingly, I failed the 11+. No matter how much I rebelled or showed off, I knew I was different. I could not be the same as everyone else, and I was also starting to get called out on my feminine disposition. Secondary school was no better. I was caught smoking on my first day, and in the final year of my GCSEs, the decision came from the school. I was not permitted to sit the exams, and my attendance at their fine establishment was no longer required. I was expelled. In my misguided teen mind, this was itself an achievement, a badge of my successful rebellion. It was around this time that our home was petrol bombed. I'd recently come out of the closet and I went on holiday with some of my family, but 2 of my sisters remained at home. It was bonfire season and several Catholic families in my area were targeted. Sometime in the middle of the night, a petrol bomb was thrown through our living room window as my sisters lay sleeping. Thankfully, they escaped the fire and got to safety, but my having not been there was to become a source of guilt, another reason to doubt my own worth. On reflection, there are few families in Northern Ireland who haven't had a similar experience in some way or another. As such, I've learned to chalk it up to experience and remind myself that this was just another part of living in this confusing little country. The next chapter was a stark contrast to the life I'd lived so far. I got picked up by an agency and I was now a model. The owner of the agency, a glamorous woman, Anne Connor, was to take me under her wing. I remember our first exchange as she glided into the room. She sent me to her car to collect some boxes that required shifting up to the second floor studio. Anton, she called, and I flushed as I realised she knew my name. I left the agency going freelance, and no sooner had I begun, I failed. There were many reasons for my failure: too young, too ambitious, too irresponsible, too vulnerable, perhaps too fixed on the job title than the job itself. I was devastated. The shame and feeling of utter hopelessness were debilitating. This was not the loss of a job, it was a complete stripping of everything I had. That is the problem when we define ourselves by our careers or any other singular thing. If it can be taken away, then so can all of you. Be careful about that. But as usual, I picked myself up and started an entirely new life. I met the lovely Jay, moved to Gran Canaria. I think we'd had maybe 2 dates before deciding to create a new life in the sun. We were there a matter of weeks, and as you might expect, it didn't work. I'm pleased to say, though, that he remains a valued friend, and as much as it didn't work out, it's a very fond memory that led to the great pathway bringing me to where I am today. So to him and to our adventure, I'm grateful. From Gran Canaria, I went to stay with family in England, and from there I found a live-in job in a hotel. I got free accommodation and meals, a minimum wage salary, and in return, I would give them my soul, working from the break of dawn to the wee small hours. If you can imagine, I'd gone from managing a modelling agency, touring as a model and as a dancer, at the top of my game, now working around the clock at the bottom end of the chain in a hotel. It opened up all those old feelings of the move from the detached house to the council house. The feeling of being out of my comfort zone, not fitting in, trying to be like everyone else, with no idea who I actually was. There's an opportunity to become a licensee in England where you can run a pub or hotel and have your name above the door. I studied like a demon to be called as a licensee, which came with a swearing-in event in front of a magistrate to declare me a licensee. Wow, the pride I felt that day was immeasurable. It didn't take long before a new night spot was opening and I landed the licensee's role and flung the doors open to what was perhaps the craziest time of my life. After a couple of years and rather a lot of dramas, the leaseholders sold the place. And although nothing to do with me, I could not help but feel those emotions again. My identity, defined by my job, was being stripped from me. I could feel the darkness creeping up in me, and I knew if I didn't sort out something quickly, the world was going to close in around me. I soon started working with a gay wedding planning company. The Civil Partnership Bill was moving through its stages at Westminster, and we were at the forefront of the burgeoning new industry. I did well and quickly garnered seniority, and with a new title to validate myself, I was now the head of fashion and style. I was back. A director of the company and I paired up, and after organising some of the first gay weddings in England, we were propelled into the spotlight as TV wedding planners. This led to touring the country for several years, appearing on stages in front of audience in the tens of thousands, writing for magazines and popping up on TV and radio. I was now a celebrity. But as I'm sure you've seen in the pattern, what goes up must come down. And having enjoyed a good run, things were starting to wind down. My on-screen husband, Dickie, and I were taking up opportunities on our own. And can I just say for the record, we never were a couple. It all came to a head for me though when my sister delivered the news of my young nephew having aggressive brain cancer. He died aged 4 and a bit. His last days coincided with an event I had booked, and I took the eyes off the event to spend as much time as I could with my nephew before he passed away. He was buried the same week at the show, and as you might expect, the show was a total flop. I lost a lot of money that day. But I had been enriched as well as devastated to have had the opportunity to be at my nephew's bedside as he slowly left this world. And at his young age, he made some very profound statements, one of which being, sometimes you just have to let go. Wise words indeed, and words that continue to play in my head when needed. A fateful day not long after, spent at the coast with a dear friend Tanya, sparked a conversation where she asked if I had any regrets. And I responded immediately, yes. I'd messed up my education. I'd never got to study law, something I'd always wished to do. Well, she dared me to look into it, and what seemed like no more than one sleep, there I was on the first day of a law degree. Despite my lack of qualifications, I enrolled without a foundation year or access course, and I was now a law student. In my first year, I won the university mooting competition, which is a competition where students battle in court to win appeal cases. Seeing off first, second, third year and postgraduate students, I was the league champion. In the second year, I flew to Gibraltar for a placement in a very successful offshore law firm. I was a founding member of the University Law Society, and in my third year, I was elected president of that law society. I graduated with a first class honours, and I was awarded a Lord Denning Scholarship by my Inns of Court. This is a prestigious award with which comes exclusive membership to the Lord Denning Society within my Inn of Court. So that brings me to where I am today. Well, I'm still a student and right now almost qualified as a barrister. I work as a university lecturer and I continue to freelance as a commentator and celebrity columnist in the media. So what have I learned? I've learned that the entire time I was chasing a job title to define myself, what I was actually looking for was reassurance that I belonged, that I had a world in which I fit, that I knew who I was and that others knew me and hopefully loved me for it or even despite it. I've learned that although the life events are different, everyone, all of you watching this, you've experienced the same emotions and doubts as I have. We all have our backstories, we all have our fears, we all have an inner voice that criticises. And I've learned that to be good enough for me, it's not a job title that will validate me, but rather that I'm happy with my choices, that I can make decisions that are good for me, that I must not allow the bumps in the road to end any of my journeys. To be good enough for me, I had to retrain the inner voice to be louder than the inner critic, to disprove any theories of certain failure with reminders that I'm loved, that I've had many successes, and that I've experienced hurt to the maximum of my capacity. Yet here I am still going. Ambition and self-esteem make the perfect partner, but also the perfect enemies. We confuse our self-worth in the drive to achieve, and we wait for motivation to find us like it will zap us from the sky like a bolt of lightning. Well, I'm here to tell you, it will not. Your success, your ambition, your motivation all lies in the belief that you're good enough for you. Only when you can look at your reflection and truly say kind things to yourself will you be ready to truly become the best version of yourself. So if I can leave you with just one takeaway from this talk, it's this. If today, right now, you feel that you're not good enough for you, then it's time for you to retrain your inner voice. Simply make lists of your qualities, your achievements, your loves. Take a selfie and share them with the world. I challenge you, whether you're feeling great or not so much, to write up your social media with unapologetic updates of why you rock. Let's together start a #GoodEnoughForMe movement. Let me and others enjoy your light, and more importantly, let's encourage each other to be our best selves. If we each do this, imagine the global tsunami of true happiness the world can feel at the same time. Imagine the changes that could bring. All with one simple social media post from you. I've learned that not every day will feel brilliant. It's okay to have an off day, to feel a bit down. I'm human, and so are you. But when you feel those feelings, remember the #GoodEnoughForMe and start writing those lists again. You are good enough for you, and you're good enough for me.